Hello and welcome back to Radio Days, Day 3. Every Radio Days we have an edition of the 555 Spectrum Voices Harry's Facebook page. So before we join the programme though, we have to remember one of the most important things at this time of year, and that's the backstage area for Autistic Radio. It's a separate area, away from where people are being recorded, away from where people are on camera, and for the 4 hours each day between Christmas and New Year you can find a place where other autistic people are, and you can hang out with them, and if you wish, interact with some text or maybe some words. That's why we're here during this Christmas period. However, why we're here right now is for Harry's Facebook. Harry, take us away for the 555 live on Radio Days.
Thank you, Jules. Hello everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Monday the 29th of December 2025. And this is where we share the posts from Autistic Facebook page. This is where we share the posts shared on the Autistic Radio Facebook page and have a discussion on the topics shared from them. So the first post is from Flourish with Neurodiversity, who's described as a coach helping you flourish and thrive, not just survive. Neurodiversity coaching and services, ADHD, EU, DHD and Tourette's, adults and children, sensory wellness, work, school, PIP, DLA support, dyslexia assessments, training and resources. And what they've shared is the following. Neurodivergence isn't being overdiagnosed, it's being better recognised. For decades, many people learned to mask, struggle in silence, or were simply labelled as difficult, lazy, or too sensitive. Today, we finally have better language, better research, and better awareness to understand what was always there. An increase in diagnoses doesn't mean that these brains suddenly appeared. It means people are being seen, understood, and supported for the first time. Just like left-handedness increased once it stopped being punished. Neurodivergence is more visible because stigma is slowly being replaced with knowledge. This recognition leads to self-understanding, appropriate support, reduced shame, and better mental health. Neurodivergent people have always existed. What's new is that we're finally starting to listen. What's your thoughts?
We saw a kickback recently in the UK where one of our senior politicians asked a question and perhaps intimated that neurodiversity was being overdiagnosed. Now, I think perhaps the politician got a bit messed up and mixed up in their words. But this idea of overdiagnosis is a weapon that is being used against the autistic community. It reminds a lot of the people who've been out there long before I was identified as autistic of the gaslighting that occurred, the "there's nothing wrong with you" idea. Now, yes, there's nothing wrong with us, but there is something that's different enough for there to be a diagnosis in certain circumstances. And this is a kickback. This is a kickback against the equity and inclusion initiatives that have been happening, the diversity ethic.
Yes, it's a worrying thing, but also a frustrating thing. And and it seems part of a movement to try and quash difference and to, you know, people have taken a long time, autistic people included, neurodivergent people included, we include neurodivergent, as a total, as a whole. People have felt, trapped or basically stood on, but finally felt free from that sort of being trodden on or stood on or put away as an embarrassment or a shame. And it seems because people are more free and people are being more vocal in a positive way about things that people say they should be ashamed about, there seems to be, as what you've described, Jules, as a kickback in many ways. But from the UK government side of things, it's down to money. What they're claiming is, or what they're suggesting, is people are being diagnosed too freely so they can jump on the bandwagon to claim benefits. And that in itself is really worrying because people should not be ashamed to claim benefits if they're entitled, if they need it. Because of the culture we live in, is if you don't have a job, and even if you are employed, you still need some benefits depending on your wage structure and how much you get paid. But getting away from that, it just feels like there's this attempt to shame people, to shut people up. And that's really not just angering, but quite upsetting because people have been through enough and they do not deserve to go through this for the sake of money. Rubbish share the text. Reminds me of origin of the name of the diagnosis, Asperger's syndrome. And added, Hans Asperger, how decided whether people like me were worthy of being allowed to live. And he continued, same attitudes towards autistic people was the scapegoating, which has been done to many people in the community, the scapegoating, to deflect from other issues. The next post is from the autistic teacher. Public figure, autistic and proud, sharing insight and understanding to help the autistic community based in the UK. And what they've shared is about the topic of small talk. And they say, why do people feel the need to fill the gaps with meaningless conversations? I would rather have a deep conversation, share information and understanding. And they continue to say, I really hate small talk. Probably because I'm terrible at it. But I just don't see the point of it. And I have no idea what to say. I would much rather say something meaningful or share information that is interesting or important. What's people's thoughts?
I've never liked small talk for the same reason. I prefer meaningful conversation. And I also struggle to find anything to fill the gaps. And if I get onto a subject I'm interested in, I'm often criticised for boring people.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I don't know. I don't like small talk, but I seem to be able to mask it in a way because I know the topics that people generally will throw in. For instance, they'll mention the weather, and if you're traveling somewhere, if it's by bus, they'll talk about the bus times, the service, and if you're traveling by train, the train times and the service, good and bad. So there's a sort of conversation to. It's not something I'm comfortable with, but it's something that I do just to so that I don't feel guilty for not doing it in the first place. So maybe there's two ways to that.
It's a good barometer um, in more than one way. It's a barometer for me to know how I'm doing. So I can sort of gauge my ability to do small talk is helping me to know what, how how I'm doing that day with people. And the other thing it's a barometer of that I find helpful for me is getting a read on people. So I can sort of pick up on sincerity and or red flags that I would need to know by engaging in it. And then I choose ones like the weather or something practical because I can see that those are practical things. However, there's a lag time with me because I'm always thinking about the use of words. For example, I'm fine doesn't mean what people think it means to me, but then I'm splitting hairs because it does mean that too.
It's looking back to the masking thing and performance. But then again, from what Robbie said as well, it's like if I do talk about something, it's a special interest, I have, maybe not as an adult, but certainly as a child, I do recall being told, in different ways, sometimes more explicit than others, that I was talking a lot of nonsense or I wasn't talking about anything interesting, in comparison to what is supposed to be normally interesting for people or children to speak about at that particular time, whatever that was. I mean, at the time, I wasn't interested in football. Um, I am now, but not wasn't as a child, and I was seen as an oddball for even that. So, if you weren't interested in football, there was nothing much else to talk about. Sometimes it was things like comic books and action films and things like that you sometimes get sort of away with, but there was other things that I was interested in. I like to talk about bus times and kind of structures of electricity pylons and all kind of things that were quite quirky. Oh, and how I forget, I was fascinated with lampposts. And nobody that I knew, and up to now, I've never known anybody to be interested in that particular topic. Although I've heard things similar, like people being interested in types of alarms and stuff like that. So it's sort of similar. But it's all about the topic. It's about the balance of people being interested. But the small talk thing is most difficult because it's rehearsed, but it's not. Because you don't know when you're going to need it.
Could a part of it be your attitude to people in general?
Yeah, maybe a defense mechanism, being cautious. Past experiences put me off, or past experiences even helping me. Of course, depending who I'm talking to and what about, and depending on what mood I'm in, and depending on the situation. Like, for instance, I mean, small talk that has helped is like coming home from traveling somewhere and the train or the bus or whatever is running late or it's not running at all, but you meet someone who's gone through the same as you for different reasons, and you feel there's a connection there, and then there's a small talk that comes from there, then you're it's a bit of a moan and a groan, but it's quite comforting because you feel you're not alone in that kind of, this problem, this situation you're in, and that sort of small talk helps. Or sometimes when you're going for appointments somewhere and doctors, and although I don't explicitly tell people what I'm there for, neither does other people, but there's this sort of kind of chit chat about, not medical stuff, but just chit chat as a way to talk about weather and stuff. That sort of does help kind of reduce the anxiety that may be around me at that time. So small talk is strange. It just depends on the situation. Robbie shared, I'm always wary of triggering conversation, news, politics, gossip. Yeah, I'll say that again. Robbie has shared a text saying that I'm always wary of triggering conversation, news, politics, gossip, etc. I get that. And where I am more wary is when I'm in a pub, having a quiet pint, and there's some people that have just got things to say about certain politics. It doesn't need to be politics, it could be a lot of things. A lot of things that's quite sensitive and things that people shouldn't say, but people get so-called brave when they're alcohol induced. And it's like, no, I don't really want to talk to this guy or woman, but I don't want to cause a fight either. That sort of small talk. I don't know if you can call that small talk, but it might be to them.
Can you hear me, Harry?
Yep.
So do you mean the content of the conversation is small talk, or the negotiation, the social negotiation of a difficult situation can sometimes be small talk too? Aye, you all right, pal? Aye. I'm just going to the bog. See you later.
Yeah. Yeah, what I mean is it doesn't help when the pub has news on, which, there's nothing wrong with that really. But there's a news item and it just triggers a conversation which isn't comfortable. But sometimes people sitting thinking they're giving small talk is actually quite offensive, or just it's getting towards a sort of direction that you don't want to be involved in, especially if you're not in agreement with it.
Yeah, I think that some people might realize that you're a bit obliged to do the small talk, and very early in the small talk, it's as if you're trapped into a topic that, in a way, if you're following the rules of small talk, you're obliged to agree a little bit. The way I find that very uncomfortable. I don't know if that's what you mean, but it could be a controversial thing that you absolutely don't agree with, and it feels hard to get out.
It's kind
Yeah.
of like... Oh, sorry, Harry.
No, just answering what the trees are saying. Yeah, there is that element of feeling trapped. But there's one thing as well is when you're being polite in small talk and then the person's speaking with you and then you're thinking, I don't really want to speak with them just because you're not comfortable. Doesn't mean they're bad people, it's just that you're not really in the mood. But sometimes you feel actually trapped in the conversation because you've actually made a reply.
Yeah, I was going to say this kind of echoes something we were talking about in the previous hour thing, about the need to say anything at all, when you're social or in a conversation. So sometimes in social settings, I'll try not to say things, even if asked, or if people are sharing opinions. But I'm also recalling something way, way back, like the most remarkable thing happened in Edinburgh. There was a pub that was advertising itself as having no TV, as if that was some kind of rarity. And it was, because there was huge sports bars cropping up in the 90s that were just multi-television. So there was this pub that just had no TV, and it was great. It was just a great experience to go in there and just hear people, kind of the murmurs of people talking, or not at all, because sometimes it was really quiet, which is a great experience sometimes when you're in a pub. Back in the days when I liked going to pubs, I've not done that for a while.
I find I just kind of get too intense about like the small talk though. Like I'll get really, really into the conversation about the weather in the person's life. Like I just always feel like I'm a bit off. And I would say this year I've just started to just avoid it, and I feel loads better for it. Having just more connections that are deliberate, and letting myself be a lot quieter in public spaces. If when I have to be there, like for kid stuff, yeah. But yeah, small talk. It's not easy.
There's that thing, when somebody will say to you, it's a wee bit cold now, isn't it? Or, the nights are fair drawing in. There's, some basic thing like that. And you go, well, that's to do, and you take it seriously, right? And get deep. Go, that's, wow, it's like something to do with the climate, or it's to do with, the seasons, and they go, look, I wasn't going to get deep about it, It was like, I was just saying it was getting a bit cold.
I think the problem for us is that we have limited social batteries. So if we use our interactions up on small talk, we feel as though we're wasting our energy. The thing, though, is that society works on small talk, and small talk for neurotypical people or people who aren't like us, it gives them a solidarity. It allows them to move to other subjects. It's a dance where they're checking each other out for all kinds of other different communications. And sometimes we miss out on the opportunity of deeper connections because we dismiss the small talk. So I have to try not to be somebody who says, oh, I hate small talk, because I know that many of the conversations I have had in the past that have gone somewhere have been instigated by a tiny bit of small talk. I just moved it away from the small talk as quickly as I could.
Robbie puts an interesting point in the text. If the conversation should cause me to have a meltdown, I would be blamed. So there's a fear with some conversations that it may be in a direction on, it might go all wrong by the way that you answer or react to a certain question or to a certain topic that the small talk would develop. Am I right, Robbie?
Yeah, there's been since Brexit, there's been a lot of racist talk around where I used to live and where I currently live, and that sort of stuff comes into sort of small talk type conversations, and I don't handle it very well. Because I am very sensitive to empathy, it quickly gets me into trouble.
Bobby, can you explain sensitivity to empathy?
Well, although I don't react in the way that you expected to react with empathy, I'm very sensitive to prejudice conversations, and it quickly is this importance of justice that is common with autistic people, and I have had several instances of getting myself deep into trouble when I've been caused to have a meltdown.
Thanks, Robbie.
Some of the things that you've been talking about, Harry, Robbie, someone else, but I'm not sure if it's Nicola, leads me to a small collection of these things that are all strategies for small talk, and some of them are abrupt. One that I remember, if I feel I'm getting really super, super, super triggered, I will just, and this was before cell phones that I developed this one, I will stand up and say, oh, I forgot. I'm supposed to be X, Y, or Z in another meeting at another place, and just barely excuse myself and hightail it out. I'm not saying it's good strategy, but I have used it from time to time.
One of the problems I have is I'm overwhelmed very, very quick. One of the things that happens to me when I go into meltdown is I actually lose the ability to walk. So I'm in trouble quite quick. So I have to identify the triggering conversation very quick to be safe.
Yeah, I can
It
understand
was
that. Go on, Ray.
No, you're asking what I meant by using a phone reminder to get out of things. It's like when you set it up to alarm, or ring. You would take it like a call, and so it was like an excuse,
Yeah, I think there's people that do that. They actually ask someone to call them or someone to approach them to tell them that they're needed for something. So it takes away from the conversation that might be uncomfortable. But it does it in a polite way that you don't cause any offence or cause any animosity. So yeah, totally get that. It's a good point what Robbie's saying as well. We're talking about how to deal with small talk and situations we're not comfortable in. He says, I'm not good at lying. So to do something a certain way would be felt as lying, I'd imagine, Robbie. And obviously it's not something you want to do or don't feel you're good at. So if I'm feeling that I'm speaking for you, you can add to it.
It was actually one of these small talk conversations at the local day centre that they used against me to push me out because I refused to apologise for something I actually meant what I said during the meltdown.
The next post is from Autism Awareness, which is a health and wellness website, health beauty community centre, raising autism awareness, celebrating neurodiversity and spreading understanding every day. And they've shared the following. Autism, for your information. Many times autistic children and adults appear to be in their own world. However, that does not mean they should be excluded from yours. Say hello, offer a high five, talk to them, get on their level, but please don't treat them as if they don't exist. And the quote appears to be someone called Drake. What's your thoughts? What I'll add for the edit. The accompanying information says what this means is bridging worlds, a simple reminder to include our friends on the autism spectrum. What's people's thoughts on how that's said? The reason that I shared it is the reason I shared it is about the language it's using and what it actually is meaning. What does it mean?
I think I might agree with you there, Harry, because I was going to say there's their world, your world, and then I'm thinking, but you're both in the same world, you know? So it's this thing about separation where you say there's one world and another world, you know? And for someone to be in their own world, fair enough, that might be just an attention mode, but they're still here with you. So it's language again, isn't it, Harry?
I was wondering if it was focused on children because it sounded a little either like they were talking about children with autism or possibly patronizing children. Yes, okay, children then. Yeah, I don't know. Um, if they had headphones on, I don't know if you should high five. I think Ray covers that though when he talks about which world, whose world.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, maybe not if we've got our headphones on, hood up, all of the signs. Um, but yeah, like sometimes I would there's quite a lot of the time I'd rather have like a wee invisibility cloak and be left to my own devices. But it is nice, like, I think about there's times that I'm watching my kid play football and I don't manage to like join in the huddle of mums, like they seem to be able to chat for the whole time. But it'd be so nice just to be able to kind of wave and acknowledge and feel like people were like hi, and then you can just sit down rather than that suspicious look because you're not joining in, because I'm not joining in.
I want us to try and look at this as benevolently as possible because, yes, if we look at it in one way, the language can seem a bit patronising. But if we look at its intention is to say, maybe if you're an autistic mum or you know somebody who's autistic or you're in that world, you're trying to reach out to other people and say, look, don't ignore these people because they appear distant from you. Let's give people an opportunity when we can rather than shunning them. So yeah, let's just say that it's an attempt at positivity to give us opportunities to interact, not be forced to interact.
Yeah, appear might be that situation where you're kind of concerned that someone's kind of remote and detached and maybe lost and struggling. So it's just another way of interpreting the word appear there. You know, an adult who appears to be in their own world. You know, but of course, just even thinking about that, I think, would I approach a person like that and just say, come on?
No, I know what you're saying, Ray, but I know what I've done, and I've done it many times. I've been on a train or in a place and I've nodded or done something tiny and then left it a very, very long time to let that person know that they are seen. And that has started conversations. People see my Autistic Radio badge on the lapel jacket and they start a conversation about that potentially. Advocating out there in the community sometimes is getting past the missteps in communication that, yeah, can irritate a bit. But as Robbie says, in the text he said, in one way it's about fitting into neurotypical society, but in another way it's also about inclusion.
I really like the way you said, Jules, a small, like a nod, that is a very good one. But I think you said a small wave. But I think this really excellent communication where It's not a large gesture, it's a safe gesture.
I had an experience this summer where acknowledging someone in the passing was almost letting too much in, because they were quite intense.
I think there's a great tip from Robbie in the text there. He says, how about neurotypical people taking interest in the interest that the autistic person is taking an interest in? So instead of breaking the situation, how about being sideways to the situation, and rather than confronting the person, look at the piece of interest and show interest, and not make a song and dance about it. Like Teresa says, it needs to be something gentle and small and safe. Safe is a great word that Teresa used there.
Is it a person who takes that interest, or can it be society and the services? Because that's what I mean when I say, I don't really expect society to accommodate me. I think I have to accommodate society and take what I can from it, because I don't think it's going to give me what I need.
The next post is from Little Puddins, IE, which is an education website, from Amanda McGuinness, who has a website, amandamcguinness.com. And she shared the following. She shared about Shane Hollander and artistic representation in a TV show called Heated Rivalry. And it continues, Shane Hollander has been widely recognised across artistic community spaces as a character who reflects authentic artistic lived experience. This is not speculative interpretation. Author Rachel Reed has confirmed that Shane is autistic, and actor Hudson Williams has spoken about approaching the role with that understanding, shaping a portrayal rooted in eternal experience rather than stereotype. Through careful performance and direction, Heated Rivalry presents artistic identity as integrated, human, and multi-dimensional. Shane's focus, emotional regulation, relational depth, and response to social pressure resonate with many autistic adults, offering representation that prioritizes dignity over spectacle. This portrayal contributes meaningfully to contemporary conversation about autism in media, demonstrating how autistic characters can be written and performed with authenticity, intention, and respect. Heated Rivalry is a show not to be missed. What's people's thoughts? Are they aware of this TV show? The reason I've shared this is I'm not aware of the show myself. I don't particularly watch, particular news shows or anything like that. I stick to what I know. But what I feel the post is demonstrating, illustrating, or representing is the important topic about how autism is portrayed in the media and film, sometimes even how it's even reported in news programs. So post is saying that this program, this show, is showing autism in a more positive and authentic light.
It feels to me that there's been a lot of controversy about different characters, and I'm not sure it's been helpful, because at the time when some of those characters that weren't full representations and were rather cliched in bits and bobs, and the fuss was being made about them, it felt to me actually that any damn representation, however bad, was another good reason to discuss this and have it out there. The fact that this is a representation that people think is good is great. Any representation of us starts some kind of conversation, as long as they're varied enough.
Yeah, we have to remember that drama isn't real life.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, that's what drama, TV shows, fiction is all about. It's about creating something for entertainment and the characters to be entertaining in some way, good or bad. But it does illustrate about stereotypes. And what I recall from programs in the past, films in the past, that represents people that are autistic, it was like from one end of the spectrum to another, like the quirky genius to the total outcast. And, and sometimes the total outcast, it would be like a criminal and would do something bad because they were autistic. And even though the drama around that would sometimes have a sympathetic tone, the character themselves would be a very negative one. So it's good that these things are happening, but and these more positive representation is portrayed. But as Jules says, I mean, as long as it's represented widely enough, people won't have cause to complain, or maybe they will, because it doesn't matter what you do, it will displease someone. I know that because it's happened to me. Not by people being autistic, but I used to be offended by how Scottish people were portrayed in some things in the past. So it's the same sort of thing.
I'll say drama at its best tells a story, and the story can make you feel things. And I'm thinking about a discussion GR and I had about the TV show Patience, and the autistic character in that is invited to a bar for a birthday celebration of a colleague. And both GR and I mentioned it to GR that I was deeply moved by that scene because it reminded me how I felt sometimes in those social situations. And she acted it out just as it felt for me in the past and still currently. Of like, what do I do here now? What's happening? The intensity of the environment and the way the moves were made between spaces, and what people said and the feelings they invoked were all visceral. That was the word I used. And GR said, yeah, I felt that too. And there were a number of scenes that were played out like that. But, so at its best, a story can make you feel something that is probably to you quite honest. But I'm just looking at that phrase there, canonically autistic. That's a goodie.
The final post of the evening. The next post is from Politics Home. It's an article based in Politics Home website. And it's an article that GR recommended, which is about Labour Member of Parliament MP Kat Eccles, who is neurodivergent. And the title of it is All People Doubt Labour MP Kat Eccles on being autistic in Westminster. So it's part of the UK government. And I won't go through it all, but it was an article from the 30th of March, and it was for Autistic Awareness Week at the time. And it says, speaking to Politics Home ahead of Autism Awareness Day, Labour MP Kat Eccles says she hopes that sharing her story will help make Parliament more accommodating to neurodivergent people. Labour MP Kat Eccles can remember feeling like she didn't fit in from a young age. Eccles was an only child, but despite her parents' attempts to get her to mix with other children by sending her to dance classes, swimming, and brownies, she gravitated towards the adults or just doing her own thing. Eccles was elected the Labour MP for Stourbridge at the July. Eccles was elected the Labour MP for Stourbridge at the July general election. 10 months on, during Neurodiversity Celebration Week and ahead of Autism Awareness Day in April, she told Politics Home she feels ready to speak more publicly about her autism and ADHD diagnoses. What's your thoughts? Considering what we were talking about earlier, about overdiagnosis being said by a member of the same parliament.
We have always been in these places. We have always been MPs. But now some people who are autistic feel able to be open in the public eye. And this person is going to be continuously trolled and attacked in social media and conventional media just because she's a woman. And now she's added another layer on top of that, neurodivergency or even disability, or even the contentious space between the two. So it's an amazing thing that she's decided to do that. But I'm imagining that as an autistic person, she felt as though she just had to. We also have Mari Black, the first person that I was aware of that was openly autistic. She discovered her autism, I think, after becoming an MP, and she represented the Scottish National Party down at Parliament.
I was going to use the word normalising there, and I thought it's quite a an ambiguous term, normalising. But yeah, it sounds like what she'll do is normalise her concerns, her being, her awareness, whether that be as a woman or whether that be as someone with ADHD or autism. By being public and speaking about things, you can take that sting out of it, hopefully, where she won't be trolled and persecuted, but just seen as someone representing a concern and a cause within, the Mother of Parliaments. Must add, I love that surname Eccles.
Yeah, thanks, Jules and Ray. There, I wasn't aware about Mary Black. 'Cause usually things like that are shared. Well, maybe it was shared, and I just missed it. Because there's so much information out there. I don't think Mary Black's been an MP for a few years now. I may be wrong, but I don't think she's no longer an MP now. So, but these are good examples. Even it's stereotypical or status symbol like, it's good to have these positive examples just to turn things round a bit from the negative examples or stereotypes for which society and the media like to portray.
Politicians kind of remind me of football players to a certain extent. It's like it's a career that's often over while you're still young. If you join in when you're young, that is. Some people are more establishment and get there after a career in industry or something, or commerce, or the legal professions. But if you're in there from a young age, you're possibly burnt out within 5 to 10 years. And so then what do? You know, did you have a second job on the back burner? No. So what you might use is the privilege, the opportunity and the access that you gained in that position to move into other spheres, what they call the 4 estates or whatever, the 3 estates. You know, you can move from politics into media, which is very much the move that most of them make.
I recall there being some controversy at Western Barnshire Council because one of the councillors, who unfortunately I can't recall the name, was neurodivergent and felt didn't have enough time to read papers that was relating to decisions which was going to be made regarding to budgets in a council meeting. It was like there wasn't enough time to examine it and read it in an appropriate way. I think that was a couple of years ago, and it made the local news, regarding, because it was someone who was neurodivergent that was being wronged, a councillor in particular.
It can be quite an abstract thing being involved in politics or an MP or standing as an MP. I don't know if a lot of us are aware of what it takes and what actually happens, the process and procedure. I've got a vague experience of it through friends of mine who were trying to get positions, but it's a strange little dance.
Talk about politics and its structure. Within autistic circles, or for autistic people, maybe the structure and even the so-called sometimes predictability, maybe that's the wrong word to use, but the structure, how things are in place, the certain amount of time you would have if you were elected, that sort of thing, it kind of gives a routine, a structure to your life. Although being a politician at any level, whether it be an MP, MSP, in Scotland, or a local council, and other kinds of kind of parliaments that are all over the world, it's just like, if there's structure there, it's like that's actually an advantage. Although the life of it would be quite, imagine, stressful. Well, thanks everyone. That was a great conversation once again. And thanks to all who shared the post that we talked about tonight. This is Harry's Facebook for Monday the 29th of December, which is part of the Autistic Radio Days, which has happened between 27th to the 30th of December 2025. Really enjoyed tonight, and now I'll hand over to Jules.
A very lovely young child in my life.
You on mute, Jules?
Have you wrapped up the programme, Harry?
Yes, sorry, we heard your voice. I thought something wrong with the sound, yeah.
Yeah, okay, mate. I'll just do the little bit for the edit. Oh shit! There's sound in the background.
Yeah, background sound.
And the second thing was that when that person. So thanks, Harry, for the 555 today, and we know that you're there every Sunday for another interesting conversation around the shares that you have on the Autistic Radio.com Facebook page. It's always a stimulating conversation, and I thank you for that. We're in radio days. This is the third of 4 days, so Harry will be back for the fourth of the 555. Fittingly, the last of tomorrow's broadcasts. So join us then, and remember that we are always available backstage, autisticradio.com/backstage.